Let's learn how to install ROS 2 on macOS. We will be installing ROS 2 Foxy on macOS Mojave, which is macOS version 10.14. Note that ROS 2 Foxy only officially supports macOS 10.14, so other macOS versions may not be compatible. You may be able to use ROS 2 on the system, but you may run into issues along the way, or may need to build ROS 2 from source to get it work on your particular version. Note that this computer has a brand new install of macOS 10.14 with only the default programs installed on it. Here on my dock, you can see I have a System Preferences notification. If I were to click on it, we would find my Mac is letting me know I can upgrade my OS. I will not upgrade, as I may run into issues with ROS later down the line, if I am not using macOS version 10.14. So to make it so that this notification is not constantly bugging me, I will simply remove it from the dock. If you have a newer version of Mac and still want to learn ROS without worrying about OS support, you may want to use a virtual machine. So feel free to go to the video on installing a virtual machine, where we will learn how to create an Ubuntu virtual machine, which is Unix based like Mac and has similar terminal commands. With all that out of the way, let's get to installing ROS 2. Open a browser and navigate to the ROS 2 Foxy installation page. We will be installing macOS from the binary packages section. Please be careful as to not select in the build from source section, as building ROS 2 from source can take several hours to compile. So from the list, I will select macOS. Here we can see a list of what we will be doing to install ROS 2. The first thing we will need to do is install our prerequisites. Note that these are terminal commands, so we will need to go ahead and open up a terminal. So I'll go to the search bar in the top right, and I'm going to search up terminal. Now, by default, the terminal has a white background with a black text. For the purposes of these videos, I'm actually going to change the color scheme to a black background with a white text, which is generally easier for your eyes to look at. So I'll go up to Terminal in the top left bar, select Preferences, and under the Profiles tab, I will select the Pro color setting. And here you can see an example of that. This is much better, although the semi-transparent background can be distracting, so I will go ahead and adjust the color so the opacity is 100%. Once it is done, I can close this window, and in my Profiles window, set the Pro version as the default. Now every time I open a new terminal, it will have this theme. Besides just coloring, there are more steps we need to take to configure our terminal. Those of you who are used to developing on Linux are familiar with a bash RC file, which we use to source and configure our terminal environment. You may not have a bash RC file by default on your Mac system. You can check by running the ls-la command in your home directory, which you will be at by default when first opening the terminal. Here you can see I do not have a .bashrc file, nor a file named .bash profile, so I will have to create them. I can do that with the touch command. Now if I run that same command, I now have the files bashrc and bash profile. Now we need to edit our bash profile, which I recommend doing with a code editor. I do not have one installed, since this is a new macOS install, so I will just use the open command to open the file in a text editor. Now I can type the following code snippet in, which will look for the bashrc file and source it every time we open a new terminal. Note that the Mac text editor has spelling correcting on by default, so I will have to fix these to be lowercase as I had originally typed them. And I can go ahead and save the file. To test that this works, I will open our bash rc file and echo bash rc sourced. Then I'll go ahead and save this. Now if I open a new terminal, you can see our bash rc source message prints to the screen. If you do not see this message, check the spelling of the code snippet and your file names. Okay, with our terminal configured, let's get back to installing ROS. We will be using a program called brew to help us install packages. We can check if we have it installed by going into our terminal and typing in brew. On this computer, I do not have it installed, and we get a command not found error. So I will right click on this link and open it in a new tab. Right here on the home screen, we are given a terminal command to run. We will copy it and paste it into our terminal and hit enter. We will be prompted to put in our password since we are installing a new program. So go ahead and put that in. It won't show on the screen. And we will press enter to continue. Note that brew may take a while to install based on your internet speed and computer processor. So feel free to pause the video now and come back once the install finishes. Alright, so brew has installed on our system, and we can test it out by typing brew help. And here we can see the documentation for brew. Go ahead and clear. Back to our browser, we will be using brew to install several different dependencies and prerequisites. The first thing we're going to install is Python version 3.8. So I'll copy that and paste it into our terminal. We will continue to go down this list of things to install. Note that the lines with pound symbols are comments explaining the command and will not do anything within the terminal. So now I'll go ahead and unlink Python. I did not have a previous version of Python linked, so I received an error. I can simply ignore it and continue on with the rest of the commands in this list. These downloads will take a while, so I will go ahead and speed up the video just so you can see what my terminal output looked like throughout the installation. Jump to this timestamp if you want to get to the next phase of the installation. Next, we will need to disable System Integrity Protection, which allows processes to inherit environment dynamic linking libraries. Clicking on the link takes us to an Apple's instructions page. We can check if SIP is enabled on our computer by running the following command in the terminal. So I'll go ahead and clear the screen and run csrutil status. Mine is enabled, so I will need to disable it. In order to disable SIP, we have to restart our Mac computer and hold Command R during startup. So let's go ahead and do that now. This is the screen you get if you held Command R during startup. From here, I am going to select English. And then we're going to go to the Utilities tab at the top and select Terminal. We can then run the following command to disable SIP. Now we can go ahead and restart the computer. I will just type in reboot in the terminal to do so. We are now going to actually download and install ROS. We will click on the link to get to the releases page. And we will be looking for the latest version of ROS Foxy. In this case, the latest version for me is ROS 2 Foxy Patch Release 4. If a newer version is available, feel free to download that one instead. Once here, we will click on the Assets dropdown and select the macOS version of ROS Foxy. This may take some time to download based on your internet speed, so feel free to pause the video and come back once you finish your download. Alright, once it finishes downloading, let's head back to our instructions page. And here we can see we need to unpack this ROS installation. So first off, we're going to make a new directory. Change into that directory. And then unpack the ROS 2 download. Alright, if you just tried to copy and paste that command in like I just did, and notice that you're saying error opening archive failed to open, that's because this is a generic command and we'll have to make sure we get the correct name on our particular download file. So I will just run the command tar xf /, which means our home directory, downloads, and then ROS2 release, and if I hit the tab button, it'll autocomplete for us. So it gives us the correct distribution, date, and the rest of the name of the file. And the rest of the name of the file that we just downloaded. So I'll go ahead and hit enter. If we head back to our installation instructions, we can see in order to use ROS2, we must source our environment using the source command. We will source it in our ROS2 Foxy folder, ROS2 OSX setup.bash. Hit enter. After sourcing my ROS setup.bash file, I get a warning saying the Connext directory is not valid, so Connext will not be available. Connext has to do with utilizing different DDS communication methods. The default DDS communication for ROS2 does not need Connext, so you don't have to worry about this warning. It is worth noting that ROS is now installed, and we can go about running the demo nodes. But before we do that, let's take care of some issues you might experience along the lines using ROS2 on macOS. The first issue you may run into is some of the Python modules we installed through Brew may not link properly to our Python. Here I tried running a ROS terminal command, but ran into errors saying the modules do not exist. So we will have to install them manually through pip3. These modules include ifcfg, netifaces, numpy, and pyyaml in order to use the ROS2 terminal commands. Here you can see each instance where I tried to use a ROS terminal command, but was unable to because I did not have one of these dependencies installed. If you want to use the RQT visualization tool, you will also need to install pyqt5, pyside2, catkin package, pydot, and pyqtgraph. And here you can see where I tried to use each RQT instance and where my errors popped up. After installing all those dependencies, my RQT works as expected. Alright, with that out of the way, let's start with the new terminal. And I'll go ahead and source my ROS installation again. Again, we can ignore this warning, so I'll go ahead and clear the screen. And with that, our ROS installation should be active within our terminal. We can verify this by printing out our terminal environment variables. And here we can see the environment variables for our ROS installation. Now, one thing to note is we will need to source the setup.bash script every time we open a new terminal. Instead of having to do that, let's place this command in our bashrc file we created earlier. That way, it will run each time the terminal opens. We can also go ahead and get rid of the echo bash source that we had created earlier. So I'll go ahead and delete that. And right below our export, we can just put in the same command that we had in our terminal, which sources our ROS installation. And since we always get a warning message every time we source, I'll just go ahead and have it clear the screen after sourcing. Go ahead and save the file. Now every time we open a new terminal, our ROS 2 installation will be sourced. I can test that out here in the new terminal. And we can indeed see our ROS version is 2 and our ROS distro is Foxy as it was in our other terminal. With this out of the way, we can go ahead and run the sample nodes that are within that installation instructions. I'll go ahead and clear my screen. So the first one is a ROS 2 publisher, in this case called Talker. And so I'll go ahead and run it using the ROS 2 command and hit enter. And here we can see publishing hello world and a counter which increments. We can then run this subscriber node called listener in a different terminal, and you see it will copy the hello world messages which are coming over the ROS DDS services. It doesn't seem like much, but these two nodes are communicating over the ROS 2 framework, in which the Talker node is publishing values over ROS, and the subscriber node is receiving those messages coming over the topic. We can stop these nodes by clicking on the corresponding terminal and hitting the Ctrl-C keystroke. Congratulations, you have successfully installed ROS 2 on your macOS machine.